Yeah, Laura. She has the dog.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our workshop, Aligning Skill 10. We're still going to be talking about aligning the skill 10 with essential skill, but today we'll be focusing more on the rubrics. First, I would like to introduce my wonderful colleagues, the sharks. I call them the sharks of the essential skills. It's Allison Buck, Associate Professor of Sociology, and Jill Hunter. He is a Professor of English and Director of the Academic Experiences and Engagement. And humble me, I'm a Karina Powell. I'm a professor, assistant professor of, yeah, that's my dream, assistant professor of sociology. And welcome all. I see some old faces and some new faces, which is great. The room is full. I hope we'll have a productive session today, and let's get started. First, I would like to go over the session overview, what to expect from today. So first, we'll go over the background and the context. We obviously going to talk about essential skills and the essential education. I know you heard a lot about it already, but we still would like to provide you that background. We'll talk about the rubrics and what entails with that and how to develop the rubrics that will be aligning with your curriculum. We will have the workshop today, which is the highlight of our meeting today. We will work on aligning your assessments to Skill 10 indicators. We'll be working on developing student-friendly rubric language, which is one of the essential things that we need to accomplish today. Bringing in your competency. Yes. So, well, let me go over the 10 essential skills first. You probably all know what they are. I don't need to read them aloud, or do I? If I do, I can still do that. But I would like to kind of briefly highlight first why 10 essential skills are called essential and how we align them with the competences we aim to develop in our students. So at their core, these skills represent the foundational abilities that graduates need not only to succeed in their professions, but just to function effectively in informed, ethical, and adaptable members of the society. So they're not necessarily discipline specific, which is great because they're rather like transferable through different disciplines, through different careers, across different careers, communities, and life contexts. Why are they essential? Well, they reflect the employees consistently identifying the most valuable skills that they look in the graduates who can think critically, who can communicate clearly, who can solve problems and work in teams. Second, they support the lifelong learning, right? So in the world where professions evolve so quickly with the AI development and all the other things, we need to know that our students have this ability to analyze information, to evaluate evidence, and to learn independently. And they promote civic responsibility, which is very important as well, and ethical engagement. So how do we align the skills with the competencies? Competencies are measurable demonstrations of the knowledge and skills. So each essential skills can be translated to the observable outcomes that can be practiced and taught and assessed within through the different courses and different disciplines. So in this way, essential skills serve kind of a broader institutional goals. So why the Jeanette? Right? I like how Allison talks about this. Well, CPE tell us it's right. It's important, right? So that's true. That's why we're all here. We need to learn what's the requirements and we need to learn how to comply with them, right? But then another important thing, and the thing that actually inspires us to get out of our beds and come here and do a great job is our students, right? So that we're doing it for our students. We're doing it to make sure that our students after graduation are going to be succeeding in their professions, no matter what they would choose to do. So yes, and the next slide, oh, sorry. Oh, there you go. I would like Dr. Buck to join stage.
Thank you, Karina. Thanks so much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's changing and what isn't as we transition to essential ed. We know that there's a lot of changes. If you were here yesterday, you heard some of this. If you weren't, you probably have some comfort with this. Does everybody feel like they know exactly what's changing and what isn't in fall? I see a few people nodding, which is great, which is honestly great. That's fantastic. Anybody feel like they're still like not quite there in terms? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Sometimes I feel that way too, and I really should know everything. So here are some things. Here's the good news. Let's start with good news. Let's start with the stuff that is points of continuity. The competencies for each element, the SAC-COC competencies that we've been using, that you remember very well from recently doing STAR reports or collecting STAR data. You all know this. So that's staying the same. No changes there. We know that the element structure is changing. We know that like the numbers might change, but the subject matter areas really are not. These are still, the sciences are still the sciences. Quantitative reasoning is still quantitative reasoning. Just the number that goes along with it may have altered. And then also what you do in the classroom. This is not about changing what you do. You already teach students the essential skills. You already teach students to use quantitative reasoning. You already teach students to communicate effectively. These are things that we know that you do. This is about making that explicit. This is about making that transparent to students. Our students, we can teach them these skills all day. We can teach them these skills till the cows come home, but they don't always know that that's the goal of the assignment. They can't always articulate that they have experience communicating effectively. They can't always tell an employer that they have experience with leadership. They need to be able to do that. Our students don't have the same cultural capital as students at UK. We want them to have all the advantages that they can because they are smart, compassionate people, and we want them to be leaders in their community. We want them to be successful in their personal lives. We want them to succeed in the workplace. So they need to be able to tell people in leadership positions what kinds of skills they have. Also, we're not looking to change the bulk of your existing assessment instruments. The goal here is tweaks rather than major changes. We are not looking to have you completely redo your assignments unless that's something that you're interested in. I talked to at least one person who was like, hey, you know what? I don't like these. I'd like to redo them. And that's fine, but that's not what we're looking for. That's not the recommendation for everybody. This is about taking what you've got and tweaking it. Okay, so what is changing? New emphasis on skill time, which is use information for decision making. We're going to talk a lot about that today. You may get sick of hearing me say that. But reinforce, that's what this is all about, reinforce. And your element specific skill, a requirement for assessment of those two. Again, transparency. Not just teaching the skill, but making sure that students know that's what they're learning. Making sure that students can tell you that they have learned to communicate effectively, that they have learned critical thinking skills. And then gen ed rubrics to account for skills and competencies. We want both of these things to be assessed, and we're going to talk about how we get there today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment. It may not be your favorite thing, but I know it's a source of anxiety. It's something that people are concerned about. And we want to make it as meaningful, streamlined, and easy as possible. So this is how this will look as we're folding in the essential skills to what you're already doing. It will be 2 assignments per element that the course occupies. You can stack a skill and a competency. You can't have 2 skills or 2 competencies in one assignment. Well, you really can, but you can only assess one. You might look at your assignment and say, hey, there's like actually 3 skills in here. That's fine, but we're focusing on all we're assessing from that assignment is 1 skill and 1 competency. Star reporting is going to look mostly the same, but we're just going to add in. Gotta go the right direction. Okay, there we go. We're just going to add in the skills and competencies here. So 1 assignment would be looking at 1 competency and 1 skill. That's our recommendation. You can have these as separate assignments. You could have a separate assignment for every skill and every competency, but that's not the recommendation. If you prefer that, that's a program level decision. I am going to hand it over to Gil, and Gil is going to talk a little bit about rubrics. Because we need good rubrics if we're going to have assignments that actually assess these things and actually tell us if students are learning the skills.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't know which direction to drive. So, yeah, that ended up. Wow. Okay, I got you. So Allison brought up assessment. Some of you were at yesterday's workshop on assessment, and I'm glad you were. It was some good information that really funnels us to the work that we're doing today. And that word work is important today because today, the bulk of today's session is going to be a workshop where you're going to get to do some thinking on your own in your table groups as a whole group as well. I do want to say one thing about assessment, and I told Allison I was going to say this, and she said, yeah, I think that audience will appreciate this. But I know how many of you feel about assessment. I have said for years that assessment is the longest 4-letter word on this campus. Okay, it used to be. Now 2-factor authentication is the longest 4-letter word on this campus, but assessment's the second longest 4-letter word. So, you know, that's important, and we're going to talk about why that matters in just a second. But we've got outcomes for today that I hope everybody will appreciate, that these are the things that we want to accomplish. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this to you. You can see that there, and it'll be in the recording as well. But we kind of have this kind of tiered approach that you have to understand kind of the philosophy or the value in doing these rubrics. And that value is not just for CPE reporting, that value is not just for SAC-COC reporting, but it's to also integrate kind of your philosophy of your course or your program's philosophy of your course into student-friendly language so that students understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. That's why Allison belabored that point about we want students to kind of master that language too, knowing what they're getting out of your course, knowing what they're getting out of an assignment. And believe it or not, a rubric can help make that happen, okay? So let's ask this question. Who's a rubric for? I already gave you 2 answers, CPE and SAC-COC, but I think all of you would be completely disinvested if that was the only answer. So who else is a rubric for?
Students.
The students, okay? Why do you think so, John?
It's kind of a foundation of tilting.
Okay.
It's like they can see what exactly you're going to be doing to assess them on this thing that you already said is really important for them.
All right, yeah, great way of saying it. Foundation of tilting. It is a foundation for kind of you told students, this is what I'm going to assess you on. This is what matters in this assignment or in this course. And so you're putting that in front of students, being transparent. That's that foundation of tilting. Okay, who else is a rubric for? Dave.
Us.
Yeah, why do you think so?
We need to know how to assess what a student is developing those skills and that's teaching.
All right, yeah, we need to know how to do that. When Dave says we need to know how to do that, we want to ensure consistency across sections of a course. That's one reason we do that. Okay, but we also want to be fair to ourselves, because I don't know about you all, but if I've got 30 students' papers to grade or something like that, I'm grading the 30th one real different than I'm grading the first one. You know, and in some ways it's better because I know better what I'm looking for or something like that. But in some ways it's worse because I see the same mistake being repeated and that 30th student gets penalized in a way the first student doesn't. So rubric also kind of helps us norm ourselves to the assessment work we're doing with students, okay? So there might be other audiences for rubrics, but I think those four, SAC-COC, CPE, students, and us all matter most anyway. So there's some best practices in terms of rubric development. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, but I want you to kind of have this in your mind. And the reason it's important to have in your mind is because you're about to do some rubric development. Okay, you've got rubrics, you've been working with rubrics. Some of you might be more comfortable with rubrics than others, but we want to put all of this language in front of you so that you can be thinking, these are the kind of touchstones we want to turn to as we are developing some rubric language, or maybe a better word than developing is revising some rubric language to focus on some of these things, okay? Those bottom, that very bottom one is more subjective than objective, but I think it's valuable in terms of how we use a rubric. Okay, because a rubric is not simply well, if our only audiences were CP and SAC-COC, that bottom bullet point wouldn't be necessary. But if one of our audiences is students, then something like that bottom bullet point is necessary, okay? And then also, these are some strategies that you might think about as you are thinking about how to develop or revise a rubric. And one thing that you're going to see as we kind of work through the work we're going to do today is that those tiers that SAC-COC gives us, that novice to proficient, that you've heard before, that exemplary to developing, you know, that those ranges, they often don't mean a whole lot to students. And so you have to think about, how do I translate that into students? If I tell a student they're novice, now K-12 students might, or students that have gone through the K-12 system, they might have a strong sense of what that means, okay? But how do we show students what that label, so to speak, means about the work they're doing, and how do they make progress toward mastery or whatever it is? That's how we're supposed to be able to use a rubric, to help guide students toward, I'll just use this easy catch-all word, toward success. So at some point we have to use a rubric to show students what success looks like, okay? Back to Alice.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do we get to rubric language that's consistent, but also comprehensible, that can be used for students, that can serve all of these four audiences that Gail mentioned? Students, ourselves, it's meaningful to us, but also something that we can use when we're writing those STAR reports for CPE or SAC-COC. So this is kind of the beginning of a norming or a calibration or an iterator reliability session for these essential ed rubrics. We have some handouts. There is a QR code. There's also an email that went out. If you're registered to the session, that should have a link to the folder. And there is a handout in that folder that focuses on skill 10. The rubrics handout for skill 10. Everybody seeing that, finding that okay in the folder? Okay.
The skill 10 rubric worksheet.
You got it. Is that a folder or a document? There's, yes, there's should be something in there. There should be a worksheet in there that is like skill 10 rubric.
Go ahead, aligning.
Aligning, yeah, aligning skill 10. Yeah, you got it. Thank you. I've looked at I have too many different Google Docs, and now I'm forgetting the names of them. But aligning skill 10. That's where we want to be. Okay. So let's just start out. I'm just going to bring up skill 10. So this is our all element skill. The reason that we're focusing on this is our all element skill. This is the skill everybody has to do in general education. And this was based on faculty feedback, and I think the reason that was chosen is probably because it is something that you all already do. How many of you feel like you teach students to use information for decision-making in your classes? Just about everybody? Yeah. Me too, me too. That's a pretty common skill. Identify, evaluate, responsibly use information needed for decision-making. And then these are indicators. These are indicators that CPE, I almost said the wrong body to which we're accountable, but CPE came up with these as possible ways that students can demonstrate mastery of the skill. And this is at the milestone or intermediate level. The reason that we're picking that one, that's where we expect gen ed to be, is at that milestone level. Currently, our thinking is GSD is where we're going to show the benchmark level. Essential education, general education, the milestone level. And then in the programs, that'll be custom. So this is that intermediate level. Develops questions with the appropriate scope for the field, implements search strategies, identifies connections, provides appropriate recognition sources. These are ways that they think students might show mastery of using information for decision making.
Allison, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we
please.
talked about this earlier in the week or maybe last week, but notice what Allison said there in that last sentence she used. These are all ways students might show mastery. Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they have to do all 5 of these. You may have an assignment that does any of the 5 of these. And as I looked at this, I realized that there's a timeline as you read left to right. Okay, so look at those cells again. When you're starting an assignment, developing questions, that might be early in an assignment. Okay, implementing search strategies, that follows the developing questions. Analyze strengths and weaknesses of information sources, that comes after they've started their search. Identify connections, that's the synthesis that comes after they have multiple sources, then provides appropriate recognition of sources. So you have to attribute those sources. You have to, be able to write a works cited page or bibliography. But it doesn't mean you have to get to that last one in order to do mastery, because students may only need to develop questions in an assignment you give, and they may be masterful at that. Okay, so understand that each of those are opportunities for students to demonstrate mastery. They don't have to do all of them, and they don't have to just do that last one.
Yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. Yes. Yes. So how many of you in the social sciences have an assignment where somebody has to, like maybe a low stakes assignment where somebody has to develop a research question? Yeah, so like that's here, right? Whereas, Charlotte, I bet you have students doing SIFT analysis in some of the like English 101. Yeah. Yeah, so that might be more here. And then if there's a bibliography assignment, right, that could be there. But all of those could be assignments in and of themselves completely that are demonstrating mastery of the skill. Okay. So what we have today, what we normally would do is an I do, we do, you do. But we don't have the I do portion because we want this process. We want this norming session, this rubric development session to be bottom up and faculty led. So what I want you to do is pull up the assignment. Did everybody bring an assignment they're using, or do you have an assignment do you feel like could relate to skill 10, use information for decision making, or something that you're using in your gen ed? Okay, awesome. So I want you to take a look at that. I want you to take a look at that assignment and see what indicator seems appropriate. It might help to think like, what learning outcome are you assessing with this assignment? So I'm going to give you, let's say 3 to 4 minutes, find your match, and then I want you to discuss with your table. Yeah, I'm going to
That's fine. I think that. Otherwise,
Also serves.
Yeah.
Five pages of information. Yeah. Say if we. I think everyone's I saw the right ways taking back side. That's a while.
But yeah. Perfect. Okay, folks. I feel like I see and hear good discussions happening. Is that we're thinking through things as tables? Can I get like an example or two? What have you found as you've looked at your assignments here?
Oh, I think we're pondering a little bit because it seems very research oriented, and the assignment we were using for analysis was about it was based off analysis, and it was to listen to music and to apply these, or to analyze the music you're listening to, and to apply the terms and information that you've learned previously in the class. And so we're still pondering on how that, we don't want to make it I don't know how to make it exactly to line up to any of these right now. So we're just pondering that. Okay, yeah. It feels very social science, hard science, right? We were just talking about an assignment where students are reviewing a film and they're using information from the class to make that determination and review the film. I think when you look at, for instance, that third indicator, I don't think it has to do bias alone. I think it could do expertise, it could do point of view. So that could be one way. I'm not sure if that really gets you there though, for listening to the music, and what kind of analysis are you asking them to do of the music? Oh, it's basically, we talk about the elements of music, the loudness, softness, the instruments that are being used, different things like that. So we want them to be able to talk about music in a more objective fashion rather than a subjective fashion, which is how most of the students approach music. I like it, I don't like it, So is the tempo fast? Is the tempo slow? They have to listen to the piece and try to tease out the building blocks of music that they've been taught. Yeah, I don't think we need to be completely married to these as they're written. I think these are examples that CPE gave us, and if we need to tweak them to make them closer to the assessment, but that to me obviously is using information for decision making, right? They're using information that they've learned in the class to make determinations about a piece of music. Quality of that music based upon criteria that have been established that say this is good. With music. Good. And that's what they're doing with an article as well. There's criteria. This is what makes information good in this field, in this discipline. And so this article meets those standards. So it's kind of the same thing for you. Okay. They are learning the standards and they're learning to apply it. Okay. Green and Napier is what has been
just instrumental in helping us think about skill 10, and does a lot of the library instruction, and has amazing examples of really good skill 10 assignments that range from very high stakes to low stakes. And so I'm really, thank you, Karina, for chiming in. I think that's exactly right. And that would be a way to like massage that language into something that works.
To me, it sounds like almost criteria number 4, both in the film and the music, because their decision is the review or the quality or the characterization of it. And really they're building connections between their content that they've learned and then the actual pieces of either the film or the music. So it almost seems like maybe that could be the criteria that would be.
I was thinking about that one too, Laura. Like I think, yeah, I think again, what we're going to talk about next is how do we make this language student friendly, but also like how do we get this into a format that works? Because we want it to work for every discipline, because we're asking every discipline to do skill 10. So I think either 3 or 4, you could see ways to like connect that. And how do we get the language where we want it to be? How do we get it to a place where it's consistent, but it works for a variety of assignments, a variety of different fields? So I think for the next portion, let's talk about how do we get the language there? How do we connect the language to the assessment, but also get this to a point where you can explain this to a first-year student? How can we make the language more student-friendly? So let's have you take what you did, what you've already done, and brainstorm with your table, talk with your table for a while. How do you get the language to something that you feel like students would read and it would make sense to them?
Right.
Yeah.
One. Yeah.
All right. Providing. Well, don't like the time. I think that's really hard because I feel that I have to make it feel a lot harder than when I was young. Sometime in December, you know, I'm 30, stage 20, till in February. Anyway, that's no stand. Yeah, these two were young, higher than the states now are. But when I was young, yeah, but that's
That's what it is. And then in the background, what that means for each of the elements is known to us. We don't need to explain that. But the idea is that when students receive the method, content, skill.
I love that. Yes, that's great. Yes, I was not fully ready to that. Yeah, I think that's kind of
Pivoting on the next question.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
But I go. There's that. That's my job here.
Stuff like this. Yeah. Sometimes you have to
I'll agree in my last cycle. I think they're in her hall with the power. That's a really hot thing, graduation. But it's just years. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's actually another thing. I called it, but it was like. It's like. So not just like the president cabinet.
Generally speaking.
How are we doing? Do we have some initial ideas? Can I get one example? I want to be sensitive to time. One thing that I've already heard and that we agree with is students may be needed. Piloting this language with students may be needed in order to really get us to the student-friendly language. Because what we think might be really, really clear and accessible may not be to our students. So we may need to pilot this ideally with maybe like first-year students in gen ed classes before we really get there. Can I get an example of something that you came up with or even a challenge that you ran into? Yeah.
So we're also in the social sciences. So as social sciences, we look at this, we think this is great, but then we thought about what are problems our students have had. And our students still think this is subjective, that decision-making is still subjective. And both of us have kind of independently come to this as our solution, which is that it's not about getting the right answer, because a lot of cases it's not, or there are multiple right answers. It's about being able to connect why you made the decision you did to the information that grounded that decision, right? So like in a PT context, we're talking about going back to the diagnosis, and correct me if I'm misstating what you told me. Going back to the diagnosis and then connecting that diagnosis to the treatment plan, and the student being able to say, this is the information on the student's chart, and because of this information, I made this decision, and that's what they're able to do. And I do a kind of a similar thing. It's coming at it kind of from the other direction, which is, this is the policy proposal we have made. This is the reason we made this policy proposal, is because of these criteria that were selected, or because of these articles or papers that we found that argued for this case. So in this case, the learning happens when the student is able to connect the decision to the basis of the information. And this might be helpful. Yeah, right. That's level 4. That might be helpful to our friends over in music and in English, where it's not about, do I like the music? Do I not like the music? It's about being able to say, I liked the music. This is why I liked the music. Is this feature I saw in the music, or this argument that I read in a criticism? And if that is completely unhelpful, then ignore us, because we're in the social sciences.
Is your interpretation supported by the information that you're using? Yes. Yeah. Because it's not the same as an opinion. It's an interpretation, but it has to be based on information. Yeah. Have this conversation all the time in methods. Okay. So there is a competency piece to this. We don't have a ton of time. But let's go ahead. Well, what do you think, co-facilitators? Should we leave this as homework as well? Yeah, let's leave this as homework. So this is taking the competency itself and trying to, again, make that language a little bit more student-friendly. I may have accidentally lied to you. There are considerations happening in UGEC about the competencies right now, but in a positive direction to make things, again, more simple, more unified, more straightforward. Let's leave that piece as homework. I'm going to talk to you about next steps. So, yes.
Real quick.
Yeah.
When I am on your document you sent out to part 2 aligning competency.
Yes.
Have a.
Yes.
It says that ask for.
Okay, I will change the permissions on that document. Thank you for letting me know. We'll make sure that I may even just put that in the folder and change the link too. Okay, and that's also the old competencies. So let's hold here with skill 10. because again, we may have changes coming down the pipeline for competencies. I think we got to a good point where you're thinking about transparency of language. And you're thinking about transparency of language as it relates to Scale 10 and your assessment. And that puts you in a great place to talk about the transparency in teaching and learning method, where you'll really get into like the bricks and mortar of redesigning your assignment. Karina and Dom Ashby from English will be leading that. Those sessions will be great. There's, again, 3 to 4 on Tuesday next week and 8:30 to 9:30 on Wednesday. You can register there. Eventually, I'd love to see the work that you've done. We would love to have your work, your thinking about gen ed language, and how this should work inform what we're doing here. We don't want this to be like a top-down process. We want this to rely on feedback from faculty who actually teach in gen ed, and not just a few of us, but folks from across different areas. There is another assessment or a worksheet for a second assessment there that looks at the second competency and the element-specific skill. So you can think through this language again for your element-specific skill, whether that's element 1 with skill 1, communicate effectively, or if you are in 1C and you're doing collaborate and work in teams. And that work can be uploaded to the folder as well. We'll send a reminder out to that. I do encourage you to talk about this language that you've worked on with actual students. Again, students are the ones who will really be able to tell us, is this language actually comprehensible to them? What we think is comprehensible isn't always, we've all had that moment where we thought we had clearly written an assignment and they're like, what are you talking about? No idea. So we want to get that feedback. Please fill out this Skill 10 workshop dates poll. After the TILT workshops, after break, we are going to have some in-depth workshops, first on Skill 10 by element. So it'll be on Skill 10, but we're gonna try and tailor it to your area. And then there will also be another set of workshops that will come out on your element-specific skills, but please fill out the Skill 10 workshop poll. I will send a reminder about the worksheets, and we'll send this out again. You'll see that again. This middle link is to the EKU graduate profile website. There are quite a few resources there, including some really cool videos on the individual skills done by people on the grad profile team, including Rachel, right? Yes, yeah, really cool. And then Gil has additional rubric resources. You can scan that to see that. We've also come up with as an essential skills syllabus statement, and I will put that in the email that goes out to all of you as well. I can stay here for a little bit if folks have questions, if they need anything. If not, thank you for being here. Take the work that you've done today, take the thinking that you've done today, and I strongly encourage you to register for TILT if you're able and build on it, continue to build on that work. Yes.